Hello everyone, I hope you're all good. Welcome back to today's lesson. So let's get straight into it. Can you please jot down our title, our date, and our learning objective? Pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to complete our do now in full sentences. Pause the video and complete the do now, please. Okay, now let's make our purple pen corrections. Give it a tick if you got it right, or just give it a cross if you got it wrong, but please make sure that you write the correct answer. So, pause the video, check your do now, and make any corrections that you need to, please. Alright, so as you can tell from do now, we are reading Act 5, Scene 1, which is the final act and scene of the texts. So we're not going to read all of it because it's quite a long scene. We're going to read some key parts to focus on Prospero. But before we do that, I'm going to give you a summary. There's a lot here, so please make sure you're listening closely. So Ariel tells Prospero that the day has reached its 6th hour, which means that Ariel should be allowed to stop working. Prospero says, yes, that's fine, and he continues to ask how the king and all the other followers are faring. Ariel tells him that they are currently in prison, so they're trapped, and Prospero tells Ariel to go and release the men. Now alone on stage, Prospero delivers a soliloquy, we're going to look at that later, which he says that he's going to give up magic. Ariel now enters with Alonso and his companions, and Prospero speaks to them in their charmed state, so he's put a spell on them. Prospero releases Alonso and his companions from their spell, and he speaks with them. And the content of the conversation include him forgiving Antonio for usurping him, but demanding that Antonio returns his dukedom. And he also talks to Alonso about Ferdinand and then reveals Ferdinand and Miranda. Alonso is super excited. He embraces his son and they talk about the marriage, and he begs Miranda for forgiveness for everything that he's done to his family. Prospero controls Ariel and says, Alonso, and says, don't worry about apologising. You've done everything that you need to by giving me back my dukedom. Then the 3 drunken thieves, Trinculo, Stefano, and Caliban, are sent to Prospero's cell to return the clothing that they stole and to clean it, as tonight they're going to have a celebration for the new couple, Ferdinand and Miranda. Prospero invites Alonso and all of the others on the boat to stay the night, and he's going to share with them the story of the last 12 years. And then when they wake up, they are all going to go back home to Naples, where Miranda and Ferdinand will be married. And the final thing that Prospero gives Ariel to do before setting him free is to make sure that the trip home is made on calm seas, which is in complete contrast with the tempest at the beginning of the text. So this is a huge scene, and we are going to look at different sections of this in detail, but today I want to focus on Prospero. So let's have a look at this section here. So this is where Prospero tells Ariel that he decided to forgive Antonio, Caliban, and the others, and that he will not take any further revenge on them. Just remember that these words on the side will help you understand the extract in a bit more detail, but I am going to read through it with you now. Your charm so strongly works them that if you now beheld them, your affections would become tender. Ariel's just talked about Gonzalo and Alonso and Antonio and all the other men and how they've been trapped up. And he says, your magic spell, your charm, has such an effect on them, so strongly, that if you saw them now, if you now beheld them, you'd feel sorry for them. Your affections would become tender. And tender means to be kind of kind and caring in this context. Prospero says, dost thou think so, spirit? He says, do you really think so? Ariel says, "Mine would, sir, were I human." He's saying that my affections would become tender if I were a human. I would feel sorry for them if I were a human. Prospero continues on by saying, "Though with their high wrongs I am struck to quick, yet with my nobler reason against my fury do I take part. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. They being penitent, the sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further. Go release them, Ariel. My charms I'll break, their senses I'll restore, and they shall be themselves." So he's saying that even though they've committed really, evil deeds and they've done some incredibly awful things, he's going to be noble and he's going to be kind. He's struck by his kindness. He says, "I will be noble and not act on anger." And then he says, "The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance." He says, "It is better to be virtuous, to forgive, than to live in vengeance, to want to seek revenge." He says that now they are penitent, which means to be full of remorse and full of regret. He says, "The sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further." He says, I don't need to do anything more because they feel sorry for what they've done. Then he demands Ariel to go and release the men. And he says, "I'll break their spells, I'll bring them back to their senses, and then they will feel like themselves again." Ariel agrees by saying, "I'll fetch them, sir. I'll go and get them, sir." So we see a change in Prospero here, particularly in this section, and we're going to look at a further change in Prospero in a little bit. But I want us to do a little bit of analysis of a key quote from that section. I want you to copy this mind map down with the quote from Ariel that says, "If you now beheld them, your affections would become tender." Remember, Ariel is saying, if you saw the men, you would feel sorry for them. Pause the video and copy this mind map now. Make sure you leave enough space around it to make some notes. Okay, what you're going to do now is you're going to label around this mind map with some ideas, and I would like you to use these questions to help you. Firstly, what does the quote mean? What does the quote suggest about Ariel if he's saying to Prospero, if you saw them, you would become kind and you'd feel sympathy for them? How does this quote suggest that Prospero needs to be more compassionate? What tone would this quote be said in, and why? And what does the word tender mean? Why is it used in this quote? Pause the video and annotate around your mind map answering these questions in as much detail as possible, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you had this mind map written down with lots of annotations and notes around it, and I look forward to seeing your ideas. Okay, we're now going to move on to talking about another section of this act and scene. This is what we call Prospero's soliloquy. A soliloquy is when a character speaks their thoughts aloud alone on stage. So at this point, Ariel has been sent to go and get the men, and Prospero is alone on stage, and he delivers this speech sharing kind of his thoughts. Pause the video before we read and copy down the definition of a soliloquy, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you are ready to read the soliloquy. Prospero begins by saying, "Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves, and ye that on the sands with printless foot, do chase the ebbing Neptune, and do fly him when he comes back. You demi puppets that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, whereof the you not bites, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms that rejoice, to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vault set roaring war, to the dread rattling thunder. I'm just going to pause that bit there. So he says, with the help of the elves that live on the hills and in the brooks and near the lakes and in the grove, he says that he has darkened the sun with their help, the noontide sun, and they've also created chaos in the seas, and in the set roaring war. He's created chaos in nature. He says, while you make toadstools, while you make mushrooms as a hobby, here, after the night has ended, you then helped me cause chaos. So he's talking about how loyal his spirits and the inhabitants on the island have been to Prospero. Whilst they do all of their things, they have also allowed Prospero to create angry winds, to set the green sea and the blue sky at war, and given lightning in the thunder clouds. It shows his extreme power here to control nature. Let's carry on reading. Have I given fire and rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt? The strong-based promontory have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, oped and let 'em forth by my so potent art. But this, we're going to stop there actually. So he continues on to talk about all of the things he's done to damage nature. He says that he has made cliffs shake, promontory is another way to say like something that's coming out of the ground. So he's made cliffs shake, and he has pulled pine and cedar trees out of the ground. He's plucked them. He says he's opened up graves and waked their sleepers. He's awoken the dead. And he said that that means that he is able to let them out with his potent art, his powerful magic. Let's carry on. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for, I'll break my stuff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. So here is where he begins to give up magic. He says, this rough magic I here abjure. This, I surrender all of my magic now. He says, when I've created some heavenly music to cast a spell, as I'm doing now, I'll break my staff, which is this kind of magic. It's almost like a magic wand kind of thing. He says that he'll bury it underground, and most importantly, he's going to throw his books, drown them, deeper into the sea than any anchor has ever sank. So when a ship is not wanting to move, they drop an anchor into the seabed to keep them safe. And he wants to drop his books deeper into the sea than those anchors. So this is quite an interesting soliloquy, because we see Prospero bragging about all of the magic and all of the chaos that he's caused, and then we see that he actually wants to give that up. So What I would like you to do now as your final task is to answer these questions in full sentences. I will not be accepting submissions that aren't written in full sentences. I will email you back and ask you to complete it properly. So please just answer the questions in full sentences the first time round. You're going to answer, how is Prospero shown to be incredibly powerful in his soliloquy? You're going to choose 2 quotes to show his incredible power. What 2 objects does Prospero say he will destroy? And then what do those 2 objects symbolize? And you need to think about what Prospero is giving up in his soliloquy. Pause the video, make sure you come back afterwards when you have completed these 4 questions. Okay, now you're back, you have your 4 sentences completed, and it's now time to submit your work. So please pause the screen now if you need a reminder of how to submit your work, and I look forward to seeing that in my emails.